Hello again, this is Carol King, the developer of Custom Home Builder Solutions, also known as CHS. This is a video about how to delete vendors, which are trades or suppliers or overhead suppliers or people that you pay that you set up in CHS in order to track where all their records go. So you assign them vendor codes and set them up in a vendors list. And we will talk about trying to delete a vendor and reasons why you cannot delete a vendor. And we will also show how to take a look at where a vendor has been used in your database. So let's get started. Where you will find vendors, as we have showed in previous videos, is over here under Vendors Setup and Info, and then Vendors List and Setup. Now I'd like to start out by using a help document about deleting vendors. So let's click Help. CHS has detected that we are on the vendors list, so it put vendors list in the search field, and it's telling you that to help narrow down the help about vendors, trades, and suppliers to be about things on the vendors list. Now notice one of the first ones up here is delete vendors and see where a vendor has been used. So let's open the help document that goes with that. When I click that document icon, the next thing that pops up, hopefully you can set up your browser so that you tell it that you want PDFs to open in your Acrobat Reader or other PDF reader that you might have. So this is opened in my Acrobat Reader. CHS is a relational database, and what that means is that any records in your accounting, purchase order, activities, etc., other tables that use a vendor code must relate to a code in the vendors table. Say, for example, you have a record that's for an uploaded document that you marked it with a vendor code. It needs to know what that vendor code is and what it goes with. So if you've used that vendor code in various other tables in CHS, CHS is going to object to deleting the vendor. Sometimes you can just go delete the related records. If it's an accounting record that it's been used as, that's a little bit more difficult. And you'll see that in this demonstration. When you try to delete a vendor, you will receive messages about where a vendor code has been used in your database tables, so it can give you a clue and why it cannot be deleted unless you delete some of those other records if you are able to. Besides providing info about how to delete a vendor, this help document will show you how to view where a vendor code has been used, as I mentioned. And I've got a tip here that we'll go over. If a vendor cannot be deleted and you would like to move it to the bottom of the vendor list that will display in drop-down lists during data entry, you can try using the feature to change a vendor code and put a ZZ as the first two letters in the new vendor code. We'll talk about that a little in this video. If you are trying to delete a vendor code because the vendor was accidentally set up twice, somebody set it up with a little bit of a different vendor code, but it's the same vendor, there is a utility to move records from one vendor to another vendor. To do that, use the button to move Update Records under Utilities on the Home tab, and we'll go over that. So let's talk about what this is telling you to do and demonstrate it. So let's close this. You could print this out and make notes. I'm going to close all tabs. You could print this out and make notes, or you could have just minimized it so that you have it in your taskbar, so that you have the help document handy while you're trying to delete vendors. This little icon here will be the video that I am doing now. So the way that you try to delete vendors is, first of all, if you know which vendor it is, you could use the alphabet buttons to go to the area. I happen to know that I'm going to try right now to delete A+ Concrete. Notice that I've marked it as inactive, and I think, I don't want this anymore. I don't want this to show up when I type an A in the drop-down list and all that kind of thing. So I want to try to delete it. So let's try using the red X button for delete. That's how you try to delete a vendor. CHS has gone out to check to see if it has been used anywhere. If it had been found that it has been used in your accounting records, you would get that message first about a table. So this is indicating to me it hasn't been used in your accounting records. But it did find that you uploaded a file and attached this vendor to a file in your file cabinet. So it asks if you would like to open the file cabinet, which makes it handy in this particular case because you can decide to get rid of the one thing that you have attached to this contact, the one upload. And it might have been a silly upload or something you don't need. You could look at it, of course. This was a silly one that I was using for demo, a picture of a desert. But I'm going to just go ahead and delete that file from my file cabinet. I absolutely know I don't want it. So I'll just click delete after this window opens. And it checks to see if it's been attached to anything. And it's been attached to a vendor. Notice right here that it says A+ contact, and that I might very well be able to change it to Z, which means basically no vendor, and save it and close. We got that contact removed, and when I clear search and refresh, I see that there are no more uploaded files for this particular vendor. So let's see what happens if we try to delete it now. It says the vendor cannot be deleted until cost codes that are attached to it are cleared from the vendor. Note that clearing cost codes from a vendor does not delete the cost codes from the cost codes master. Let's do OK, clear them. That's just on your vendor setup where you can attach the vendor to various cost codes in a table that's a list of cost codes and vendors. So let's clear those. And it says that's been cleared. So let's see if there's any other issue with deleting this. It says CHS has checked to see if this vendor has been used in CHS, and it has not. So note that if you delete this vendor, a record of the deletion and who deleted it will be added to the audit table. And is it okay to delete this vendor? And I'm going to say, okay, let's delete it. Notice it is no longer in our list. And what I can do is check the vendor's audit table. And notice that right here on today, me, the user, Carol King, it will tell you which user, confirmed deletion of this vendor A+ concrete. So if you're wondering where that vendor went, you could go to your big audit records. You can do things like go ahead and search for various ones that have been deleted by doing search and type part of the word I already did, delete, in here, submit search in the description, and notice I see all sorts of audit notes about user confirmed deletion of certain contacts. And so that helps you find out what happened to certain vendors. So let's go ahead and close that audit. I think I made that point. Now I'd like to try to delete a vendor that does have accounting records, and I'm going to try to delete Big Buck because we use it a lot. And I'll use the X button here. And it says it cannot be deleted because it has been used in your accounting records. Tells why, it tells other things that you can do, and one is try to use utility to move records, but we'll go over that in a minute. And it does say, would you like to see a report? It doesn't just say, would you like to delete all the accounting records like it did for the couple other things that we saw. So if you want to, review everywhere this vendor has been used in your accounting records, you can. That basically says you're not going to be able to delete Big Buck. Even if all of the payables records that you had entered were unpaid and you went to delete the unpaid records, there's going to be an offset entry posted to accounts payable in your accounting records that clears it out of accounts payable, and the other side of the record to mark a record as deleted in the background. Both of those will have the Big Buck vendor attached to them, which means they'll still be in your accounting database. So it's not going to let you delete it. But here's a tip. Let's say we just absolutely don't want Big Buck anymore. We could actually go and change its code. And we might try putting, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to change Big Buck, but this is just to show you how you might. I could try putting in ZZ Big Buck, and I'd change the vendor code, and what it's going to do is cascade throughout your entire database and all of your tables, and anywhere that Big Buck was used will now say ZZ Big Buck. So it does take care of that, and the reason you might want to do that if you're never going to use them again and they're old and inactive but you can't get them deleted is that will make them fall to the bottom of the list of vendors. So when you're doing a drop down and you start typing Big Buck for an accounts payable entry, you're not going to find it. It's going to be way down at the bottom, but it'll get out of your way to where you don't see it so much. When you start typing a B, you won't see the Big Buck. So you change the vendor code, and if you do that, of course there will be an audit record about that. But that's how you could maybe handle it if you cannot get rid of the particular vendor. Now the other thing is, you may want to review, say you've gotten a bunch of messages about where a vendor has been used so that it can't be deleted. You can click the used button here to find out the various tables where this vendor has been used. For example, if we look at purchase orders and cost management review, you can see the various purchase orders that have been issued, 2 big buck here, grouped and totaled by job. But notice how it shows what the actual costs have been attached to this PO, but no actual costs have been attached to this PO. No actual costs from your accounting have been attached to this particular purchase order yet. In that case, you could go to the purchase orders menu if you needed and try to delete this purchase order because it doesn't have any costs attached to it. It will probably let you. But since there are other ones with costs attached, that means they're in the accounting database and you're still not going to be able to get rid of big buck. But you can drill down on all sorts of things here, scheduled tasks assigned in your schedule, and those you could go delete from your schedule if you needed to. Activities and notes you could probably go delete. Waivers of lien tracking, I won't go into all of these, but you can go delete the tracking table from the waivers of lien window. So there's, or vendor bids. Some of these you could get rid of, but if you've been told it's in your accounting database, you're just basically not going to be able to get rid of it. Now, another reason you're trying to get rid of a vendor is that maybe somebody set it up twice. Like I said, accidentally somebody set up one called Buck Big all of a sudden because they just decided that's, or BB or whatever, construction, and added a new vendor, but it's actually the very same vendor as this. There's a tip up here about move records from one vendor to another. If you have accidentally set up 2 vendor codes for the same vendor, you can move database records from one vendor code to another vendor code by using the Move Records button under Utilities on the Home tab. So let's jump over to the Home tab. Let's collapse this. Look at Miscellaneous Utilities. Move Update Records. There is a button here to move records from one vendor code to another vendor code. And let's say ABC Foundation is the same as Big Buck Foundation or something, some other thing, but or Acosta Framing. I don't know why, because the name is Acosta. Let's try that. Notice it's ABC and we want to move all records from ABC Foundation to Acosta Framing. But I'll show you what will happen. This utility is meant to be used for moving records from one vendor code to another vendor code where both have the same exact vendor name. Please go to the vendors list under Payables and edit the vendor with the least amount of POs or checks so that the vendor name is exactly the same for both of the vendor codes. This is CHS monitoring so that you make very sure that it's the same vendor, that you gave it the same vendor name, but you just happen to use 2 different vendor codes. So that's your instructions. In this case, if you wanted to do it, you need to go change Acosta Frame vendor code to be saying ABC Foundation as the vendor name, and then it would move all of the records in all of these tables from one vendor to another, and then it would be possible to delete the vendor that you move the records from. So I think that that is everything I needed to talk about to give you some hints about how to try to remove vendors. You can set them to inactive so that it won't let you print checks for them, but you will be stuck with them if you've used them in accounting, or your entire accounting database would become illogical if it couldn't find a vendor that had been referred to in other tables. CHS is very, very diligent about making sure your accounting records are kept in balance. So once you've done much accounting work, it is difficult to remove a vendor. It is possible, if you purge your accounting records and use the utility to do that when you're wanting to purge some records for old years, that you would be able to finally get rid of that vendor, because once you purge some records, you can actually go delete the historical records that relate to that and then get rid of that vendor. But that's not done all that often as the means for getting rid of a vendor. If you set them up and you use them, the database is going to require that you keep them here. Anyway, I hope you have a great day today, and thank you for watching.